Hi, everyone. This is Megan.
And this is Steven.
And this is the Synchrony podcast where we talk about transforming apostolic dating culture and ending loneliness in the church. Happy Friday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. I am the ripe old age of 32 today.
Woot woot.
Yep.
You cougar, you.
Don't make it weird. Steven is 31 for like a handful of months, and then we'll be the exact same age. But for this brief period of the year, he gets to tease me about being the older woman.
That's right.
So this has been a fun afternoon.
Yeah.
So we're recording this on a Friday night, kind of late, because earlier in the night we had our community game night.
Yeah.
Which was really fun.
It was a lot of fun.
I know we're saving announcements for the end, but I want to take just a second to talk about the community really quickly and kind of just like give people an update.
Go for it.
So we launched the Synchrony community in April, and this is, if you aren't familiar with it, it's a closed online forum that's just for our Synchrony singles that have gone through the consultation process. And it's a work in progress, and we have a lot of plans for it. And I wanted to kind of just talk very briefly about some of the things we're excited to have there that aren't in there yet. So if you just join the community and you're like, I see some message boards and some meetings, but not much else, please stay tuned. We have some more exciting things coming. But the key thing that I think is going to be really cool to have there are courses. And I'm really pumped because we're getting close to being able to release one of our courses for helping people identify barriers, the things that make it difficult for them to connect with other people. We built out this whole exercise. We did like a little pilot test group with it and had people go through it and give me feedback about how effective it was.
And we're getting some really good feedback.
Really good feedback. And I'm really grateful for the folks who kind of volunteered for that. So,
and I love this, not just, yeah, it was great. It was a lot of really constructive feedback, which is nice.
Yeah, it's good. So I think it's an effective exercise, and it's going to really help some people. If you're the type of person who has just found it very difficult to connect with other people and you're not sure why, I think this might help shed light on that. And I'm really excited about that as a tool. So that's going to be free for everyone who's already in the community. And we're also going to make it available to folks outside of the community. We haven't figured out exactly what that will look like yet, but please stay tuned. That's one piece of what we're hoping to do in the community that we're excited about. There's other things that I'm really pumped about starting to incorporate there, like interest groups and more opportunities for singles to interact outside of just activities that are hosted by us.
Yeah.
So we're excited about that. Thank you to everyone who's been in there giving us suggestions and just for your patience while we figure out how to make it work for us. But we're excited. Our game night tonight was awesome. We had a lot of fun. We played a lot of like word-driven games, and I mean, almost fell out of my chair laughing a couple of times. It was good. Did you have a good time?
I did, even though we were having mic issues. But, or I was having mic issues. But.
Yeah, Steven was the behind-the-scenes sound and video guy for most of it because his mic was kind of malfunctioning. But
well, it's not that it was malfunctioning. We were having an echo because we were sitting too close, and I couldn't figure out in the moment how to fix it.
Yeah.
So we'll fix it next time.
Yep. Anyway, thank you guys for coming. It was a lot of fun. We look forward to the next one.
Yep.
So this is kind of a part 2 of our discussion with the folks at the Hyphen Rally that we went to last week, but it's a bit of a different flavor. And I'm excited to talk about that because I think this is a really important idea that comes up a lot when people are talking to singles. And I think we want to kind of reshape the conversation a little bit.
Okay.
So we're going to be sharing part of an interview that I did with Brother Colin Taylor. And he's a young minister. He's been very active in the Florida district. As long as I can remember. I mean, we're around the same age. So
yeah. I also worked camps with him a couple of years.
Absolute servant. I mean, just really invested in the work of the church. And he's actually married, so he's not a single person. He's not, coming through the Synchrony pipeline. But he and his wife got married not that long ago. And they have a really interesting dating story. We talked briefly about that, but he sat down with me and we kind of unpacked the concept of waiting on the Lord. Like, which I feel like when you hear the term like waiting on the Lord, what do you feel like most people think of when they say that in reference to single people?
It's kind of funny. What I think I hear the most of is like I kind of imagine it like people actually being waited on.
Oh, like serve
Like
the
a
Lord?
wait, like no. Like waiting on a waiter. like making a request and waiting for it to be delivered to you.
Oh, like sitting and just
Like
waiting for
sitting and
someone to
waiting.
carry something over
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, like waiting on the Lord, right? You know, I've prayed, I have made my request, and now I am waiting on the Lord. I'm waiting on God to bring me my platter.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's probably what a lot of people, I don't know if they would frame it that way, but that's probably kind of the connotation of like, be still and know that he is
Yeah.
God, right? Like, sit still. And we want to kind of just unpack that a little bit more, because I don't think that's the entirety of what waiting on the Lord means when it comes into the dating space. I guess we should just kind of like point to the elephant in the room, right? Like, I don't believe that the Bible wants us to be inactive in our search.
No.
Like, I don't believe that taking action and taking control of your dating story is taking it out of the hands of God.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at any example in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot recall anyone waiting on someone to deliver their wife, except the exception is Isaac, with his father servant bringing him his wife.
Right, but there was still an
But there was
active
still
search ongoing.
there was
He
a
wasn't
search.
driving the search, but
No.
somebody was searching.
Yeah, I mean, even Adam, even though he wasn't searching, it still required something of him.
Yeah, he sacrificed for it.
Yeah.
So I think that in our culture we've come to think a little bit that to wait on the Lord as it is intended in relationships means just sit still and expect God to do it.
Yeah.
And if you take control of it, you might be putting yourself outside the will of God. And I do want to say that, like, considering the will of the Lord in relationships is so important. Like,
Absolutely.
This isn't to say, like, we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Like, we need to, our relationship choices should absolutely be influenced by the will of God.
Yeah.
But we have that in Scripture. Like,
Mm-hmm.
He's given us a guidebook.
Yep. I mean, going back to sorry for the people who are avid listeners, but you're going to hear me say this again.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to what my old pastor said when I was asking about whether or not it was a good idea to get back with you.
Yeah.
If you don't know the context for this story, go back and listen to our story.
Yeah.
The moral of it was, I was asking for if it was God's will, and pastor said, Stephen, it's not who you marry, it's what you do in your marriage.
Right.
And so it's like, the ball is in my court of who I choose who to marry, which means I have to decide that. I'm not saying that you don't pray about it. I'm not saying that you don't ask for guidance from the Lord. But that being said, you have to decide who you're going to be happy with, as long as you're maintaining your doctrinal beliefs and as long as you are equally yoked.
Mm-hmm.
God lets a decision up to you.
Yeah, and you have to form your own understanding of your values, and
which means you need to understand what you want.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes waiting on the Lord is a little bit of a cop-out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
sure.
I don't want to have to do internal work.
That would preach. Like, it's delegation to the Lord,
Yeah.
not expectation sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I'm going to offload this labor to the Lord, because and sometimes it comes from a place of fear. Like, I feel ill-equipped, right? Some of the people that I talk to that are so adamant about like just waiting on the Lord have been really hurt in relationships, you know?
Yeah.
And so they're kind of like, I'm going to wash my hands of this. I don't want to be in charge of it again.
Well, let me caveat this. That could have sounded kind of rough.
Mm-hmm.
They either are choosing to not do work on themselves or do not have the tools to work on themselves.
Yeah,
or
right.
have been taught the tools.
Right.
So I wanted to not put all the blame on people.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone's kind of at a different stage in their journey of understanding like what their values are and what that means for them, right? And people have a lot of different experiences. You know, a lot of people I've talked to who, you know, have maybe been in a few serious relationships and they haven't gone well.
Yeah.
They don't trust themselves to make good choices.
Yeah.
And so I think it's both handing it over to the Lord because of a sense of like, well, I'm not equipped to do it, or the sense that like I'm scared of what would happen again if I made the wrong choice. You know? So the Synchrony Project is all about empowering you to make better choices in dating. Like we want to give people...
And giving you the tools to help figure out what you want.
Exactly. And the language and helping to put the pieces together for you. But in order to do that effectively, we have to kind of break away from this mindset of waiting on the Lord means doing nothing and sitting still. So segue to Brother Colin.
Yeah.
We have a great discussion because I'm going to kind of like preview it a little bit. We start talking about the advice he would give to young single people as a married man, right? And his advice, the first thing out of his mouth is wait on the Lord. And when we were talking about this, I immediately felt something kind of like roll over in me, like kind of like, oh no, here we go again. Like I got worried, right? Yeah. But we started to unpack it and I realized that he and I were defining that differently.
Yeah.
And he brought up some really great points about how waiting doesn't mean not making yourself available.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean closing yourself off to dating opportunities or not interacting with people. But for him, it meant prayerfully developing a really clear sense of what it was that he wanted.
Yeah.
And it's just a really special story.
And then looking.
Yeah. And when the right person presented herself in his vicinity, going after that.
Yeah.
You know, and making a move.
Yeah. Well, so let's go ahead and listen to Brother Colin in his interview.
My name is Colin. I am 29 years old. I'll be 30 next month. I am currently assistant pastor, youth pastor, and also active in Spanish ministry at the Pentecostals of Orange Park.
Amazing. And you are actually married. So how long have you been married?
We've been married 3 years this past March.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yes.
Happy belated anniversary.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
So cool. Okay, so the dating space is hard. Like, I feel like, and this might be a stereotype, but based on the 400 plus apostolic singles we've spoken to and surveyed, the dating scene is just challenging, right?
Yeah.
You were in there in the not too distant past, and now you're able to kind of look back and see it from the other side of someone who's crafting an apostolic home.
Yeah.
What do you tell the early 20-somethings young men who are just starting to enter the dating world? Like, what piece of advice do you want to leave them with?
You know, in that particular age, there is sometimes, well, there's two ends of the spectrum. One end of the spectrum is I really feel like I need to get out and date. There's like this pressure, but then the other end of the spectrum is the recluse, I don't really know. That's just not my time. And so I would just say truly, and let me just say the most stereotypical, the most common thing is to wait on the Lord. And my testimony is that I truly waited on God. Whenever I was 17, I came to the Lord, but when I was 19, I had an issue with a girl from my past, not in the church. I had to deal with that. But I said from that moment, I said, Lord, I'm not going to date anybody until I know this person is my spouse.
Yeah.
So that was 2013, and I just got married in 2021. So
Yeah.
I went essentially almost 10 years on that promise, and it happened the way that I promised God. Now, people aren't that radical. Some people, they want to go out and, explore, so to speak, try, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I was just determined. But whenever God gave me my spouse, that promise came through because I waited on God. But the funny thing is this: you got to be open to it.
I was going to ask, did you ask your wife out?
So crazy thing is that it just started with a text message.
Uh-huh.
It started with a text message where I said, it was just very cordial.
Yeah.
I had proper walls and boundaries up, like not to give off any type of flirtatious thing.
Right.
But I was just open still, and then it kind of just continued. I'm like, oh wow, this is new. And then it kind of just formed in that. Of course, this was COVID, so this is 2020. This is
So
literally
everybody is communicating just by text message.
literally
at this point.
right before. I mean, we were talking in February. I told her I liked her in March. The day, like that was a Monday, where we were like, let's pray and fast. We said that, and we just cut off communication to pray and fast. Literally, like 2 hours after that, our governor, Ron DeSantis, gets up and says, hey, we're going to, do this 15 days of, staying home or whatever, however you worded it. I'm like, yo, this is crazy. But anyways, God did a lot of confirmation after that. And so we didn't have our first date until June.
Yeah.
But I was open.
Yeah.
And so it
I-
was weird, but I was open.
Yeah, I want to kind of take what you said about waiting on the Lord and reframe it a little bit, because I don't think what you mean by that is I'm going to pretend like the other gender doesn't exist.
Correct.
Right? Or I'm going to shut myself off, because like you said,
Correct.
you knew what you wanted, and you
Yes.
knew what God had promised
Yes.
you. But when the opportunity presented itself to sort of see if this person aligned with those things,
Yes.
you were able to step into that with some confidence.
Yes. I mean,
right?
I knew I had very specific things, nothing that had to do with physical attributes. It had everything to do with spiritual attributes.
Yeah.
And so waiting is never passive.
Right.
Waiting is actually active. If you want to get super theological, if you look up the word waiting, it's actually not a passive thing. It's not just
Yes.
sitting around doing nothing. It's active. But I had interactions with females, with ladies who were single all the time. And I've had both where they were trying to, or I could see they were actively trying to gauge me, try to see where I was at, and vice versa, me gauging them.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing wrong with that gauge. Now, the boundary that I had is that, I just wasn't going to give off any type of flirtatiousness, any type of sign, because I truly didn't know in the moment, oh, this could be my potential spouse. Like, I just didn't know. And so if it builds from there, it builds from there. But I wasn't going to act like they're just not there. I had plenty of friends, and plenty of people suggesting to me people, but I never made it that, like, hey, let's go on a date tomorrow. Like, it always starts platonic, and then it moves forward. I think that's how it should be at times.
I think it's great. So I love the idea that while somebody is waiting and trusting and
Yes.
talking to God about what they need and what they believe God has for
Yeah.
them, they're also open to just engaging with other people and having conversations and seeing
Yeah.
what's there and holding both, right?
Yeah.
God can both help you find those boundaries and put up those fences and maintain those,
Yes.
while he also opens up opportunities for you to build confidence in talking to people and
Yeah.
seeing what people are about.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I was like, I had a reputation, at least some people thought at times, that, man, is this guy ever going to get married? It's just like, yeah, I mean, I knew I was going to get married. I knew that. I was just willing to wait for God's best,
Yeah.
The Lord, whoever it is, I'm truly giving it to you. And so I truly left it in his hands. And that's the funny part, is that it happened in the most crazy way that I couldn't even explain. Had nothing to do with me going and reaching like, hey, I didn't have a reputation of being like this person who's like, oh my God, he's like actively looking. I didn't have that reputation. I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to see what happens. Whatever you want, Lord, I'm open to it,
That's awesome.
Which, funny story about that, I'll do that and I'll leave. 2014, so this is like right after almost 2 years after I did that promise with God, the Lord spoke to me and said, "You need to get a Spanish Bible." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm not Spanish. I'm not Hispanic. I'm black and white." I had a heart for Spanish ministry, but I just didn't connect it. But he spoke to me, get a Spanish Bible in 2014. Well, years later, I was talking with my then future spouse, Abigail, and she is active in Spanish ministry.
That's awesome.
And so, but let me tell you something. In between when God spoke that to me and me meeting her, I mean, it's not like I was like actively active in Spanish ministry. It's not like I had this sign like I'm gonna have a Spanish wife. I honestly just obey God, bought the Spanish Bible. Okay, God, that's it. But years later, I meet Abigail and we start talking. And when the time actually come for us to get married, I felt like I was stepping into a new dimension of my call from God. And so I just encourage everybody, whatever your call from God is, whatever you feel like God's calling you to do, you need to make sure that you're praying for your spouse as you're praying for your calling. Because I'll give you another example. I didn't know she was going to she wanted to go in global missions. She had a heart for global missions. I had a heart for North American missions. Well, we saw that as a conflict, but actually, it's actually been really well because we're active in ministry here in the States, but we're also active in overseas in Mexico as well. So it matters. Yes, it matters who you marry, but it matters the call of God on your life and that other person's life. You'll know who it is when God brings it in their time. So
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Absolutely.
We
love you.
appreciate you. Thank you for your ministry.
Oh, I really enjoyed listening to him.
Yeah, he's really awesome. And just so, like, again, just invested in the kingdom. I mean,
Yeah.
He's one of those people that just has kind of like a laser focus, I think, on that work. But I appreciated him sitting down and giving us some time. He like volunteered, which was really cool. So I was grateful.
That's cool. After interviewing him, what did you think of his perspective?
Yeah, there were a few things that I really wanted to kind of pull out. So I think one is that, he wasn't waiting and just being still.
Yeah.
So he talked about how, he had decided as a very young man in his dating experience to not get into a dating relationship with someone who he didn't feel was the kind of person he could marry or that he thought he would marry, right? And he said, this is kind of radical or whatever, but I didn't want to date someone I wasn't going to marry. And it was like, I don't actually think that's that radical in the sense that I think I could shift that and say he was dating around his values.
Yeah.
And he was determined that he would only date someone that was a good fit for his values and his calling.
Yeah.
And I admire that so much. I mean, that's what we talk about with the people that we work with.
Yeah. And it's also like a good way not to waste your time either.
Yeah, like you're not going to pour your energy and your investment and your time into something that doesn't have long-term potential.
Yeah.
That was really cool, and I appreciated that. And the other thing that I thought was cool is that even though he'd made that decision not to be basically a part of dating culture,
Yeah.
right? He stepped away from that to focus on his ministry. He was not keeping himself away from interactions with women.
Yeah.
Right?
He was still keeping his eye out, obviously, but also he was also like not inhibiting his interactions with other people.
Right. So he's not ignoring the women around him.
Yeah.
And I love how he talked about with his wife, he didn't approach his interactions with the woman who eventually became his wife as an attraction-driven dating interaction, right? He said he was cordial. It was, over text message. He kept it very respectful. He had boundaries. And so, his version of waiting is not, I'm going to sit back and just allow the Lord to bring someone into my life. Like, he was actively involved in the spaces and in building connections with people. He was just preventing himself from becoming emotionally entangled and romantically entangled with someone before he understood that they were the right fit for his values.
It was more of like, Lord, guide my footsteps and put someone in my path as I continue this journey, and I'll be looking out for it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the heads up, bro.
Yeah. Thanks for the heads up, bro. Yes.
Thanks for getting my back, man.
As we should all be praying. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I love that. And like, I love how he talks about sort of stepping out in faith with when God spoke to him about buying a Spanish language Bible.
Yeah.
Right. And taking that and saying like, okay, I mean, I hear you say this. I don't really know what this is for. I don't have any interest in this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And then God opening up a door for him to marry someone who's actively involved in Spanish language ministry.
Yeah.
And I just think that's amazing because it's like that the whole thing shows that he's still taking ownership of his dating experience. He set the boundaries, right? He put the walls up. He made the decisions about who he was going to text and how he was going to interact.
Right.
And he still took action to interact with people and make himself available for what he knew God had for him.
Yeah.
But he was still relying on his discernment and on the voice of the Lord to guide his interactions with people. And I love that combo. Like, you're not expecting magic from God. You're expecting to have to do the work, but you're listening for him to give you guidance every step of the way.
Yeah. It's really powerful.
Yeah. What did you think about the part when he was talking about the missions thing?
Oh, yeah, where he's basically talking about that her being called to global missions was potentially not a deal breaker, but it was a little bit of a conflict in whether or not he was going to decide to continue dating her or not.
Right.
Is what it sounded like. That's what I extrapolated from it.
Yeah. I think it's great to reframe missions calling as not just one type of missions, because we know a lot of people, we work with a lot of people who feel a very strong passion for foreign missions.
Yeah.
Right. And there are a bunch of different ways to live that out, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm not here to tell someone what the right way is for them or what they feel called to. I think most people, when they say a foreign missions calling, they imagine themselves getting appointed and moving abroad and living abroad and that being their primary sort of space that they're in.
Yeah. I think this would be better suited for having someone with more theological training in this area, but like, I'm going to give my 2 cents anyways. I think that
I love that. We're not experts, but here's our opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we have opinions.
Yeah.
I wonder how much we bottleneck Christ's potential in us because of a, air quotes, calling that we received.
Because of a label.
Yeah, because of a specific calling that someone prophesied or someone said something or you felt burdened about. You might ultimately end up in that area, but you have no clue the journey to get there.
Like, just to give it a personal example, I cannot imagine if a prophet from the Lord walked up to me in church while you and I were dating, right, and said,
I know where you're going with this.
You are going to work with your husband to build a dating-focused ministry that helps single people create connection and ends loneliness in the church. I would have been like, you're smoking something, because at the time I was very much expecting to be in music ministry, to be doing my social science work in academia. I was expecting you to be like, armor bearer, like Bible study director.
Nurse.
Yeah. Like, we had a very different plan for our lives in that moment.
Yeah.
We were called to our knowledge, we were called to different things because we had put labels on the callings and passions that God had already put in our hearts. Right.
Yeah.
And those labels weren't bad, but it's not where God took us.
Yeah.
So the takeaway here is we're not trying to discourage anyone from wanting to become a fully appointed missionary. It's just to think that we as humans put categories around things, right? We say, I feel passionate about this, and that means that I need to go do this, right? And we do this our whole lives, right? You get tunneled into a magnet program in school, and then you get tunneled into a college major, and then you get into a career, and you define yourself by all those labels of like, well, I majored in biology, so now I'm going to go become a biologist, and now I'm going to do things that are, you give yourself paths. God doesn't have to work within your labels.
No.
And there could be people who are in deep alignment with your values and priorities who are using some labels that don't align perfectly with the labels that you're using about what they want to do with their future. And that might not be as big of a barrier as it feels.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that it's important to talk about where you want to be.
Yes.
And where you want to go. And I think we're not saying don't just ignore where your calling is.
Right.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, for some reason, if you're absolutely made up mind that I will never do foreign missions,
right.
and you're talking to someone who wants to do foreign missions, sure, by all means.
The Lord's like, I bet.
Yeah. I say, first of all, I would dare say that is a dangerous game you're playing.
Right.
But at the same time, like, I just feel like it's restricting God's hands by you saying, I'm not going to talk to this person or give this person a chance because of where they say that their calling is.
Right. To give people some confidence too, like in a matchmaking scenario, I do try to prioritize putting people who are called to foreign missions with people who are also called to foreign missions, right?
Yes.
Or people who are at least open to entertaining the idea of being called to foreign missions.
Yeah.
And I try to avoid pairing people where one person adamantly wants to stay in the country all the time and be focused here, and one person adamantly wants to be out of the country. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to listen to what you tell me about your passions and your
Yes.
callings and act accordingly. But we want you to critically examine what you're telling us.
Yeah.
Right. Like, hold that up to the light and go, would I be open to God doing this in a different way?
Yeah. I mean, we've had a couple scenarios too where we've had people say, hey, I really like this person. We click in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, but we have different ministry callings, so we're not
Right.
going to move forward.
Yeah. The takeaway here, guys, is we want you to listen to the voice of God. We want you to understand what God is calling you to in terms of the qualities that you need to have in another person that would help support the passions and the work that you're doing in the kingdom. But try not to box him in too much into one definition of how that can look, because he
Yeah.
can surprise you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I don't want to get bogged down too much in the nuances of dating as a foreign missionary, because I think there are lots of people that I want to bring in to speak to that I think would give us some really eloquent, insight into sort of the mechanics of how it works for them. But I just love the perspective of Brother Colin, where he hears God say, buy this Bible. And he's like, sure, don't know where I'm going to use that, but
Yeah.
I trust that you're going
That's
to
what
make
we're
that.
talking about.
Yeah. I trust that you're going to make that part of my story.
Yeah.
And it comes to fruition a few years later in a way he couldn't have anticipated, with this person who turns out to be the person that he needs,
Yeah.
you know? So I think that if someone's listening to this and kind of going, well, like, how do I apply this to me? If you are saying to yourself, I'm going to wait on the Lord, and you're using that as a way to allow yourself to not investigate the potential that you see around you, you're doing it wrong. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Like,
It's okay.
okay.
You can be harsh.
I don't want to be harsh. I don't want to come across, I don't want to rub people the wrong way, but I need you to understand that that's hurting you.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, Jesus gives us a perfect example when he tells the disciples, hey, you're going to catch a lot of fish.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what are you talking about? We haven't caught anything. He goes, no. Go out and fish.
Yeah. Go do the fishing.
Yeah, go do fishing. And they're like, okay, crazy. And then they go out and they fill up their boat. Like,
Right.
they had to still go back out and fish.
Yeah.
They still had to go out and they had to trust God that he knew what he was talking about. And do the work.
Right.
And then they reaped the reward.
Right. And similarly, like when we think about the phrase, wait on the Lord,
Yeah.
many, I would say, I pulled up my Bible app to double check this to make sure I'm not about to like lie to people, but I think it's fair to say the majority of references to wait on the Lord are in Psalms. Like that's maybe the most common places where we're quoting it. It's certainly not the only book that says that, right? But it's a lot of references to the Psalms, to Proverbs, to the prophets, the minor prophets, right? These were not inactive men, right?
No.
King David is not saying, wait on the Lord, shut yourself up in your home and don't go out into the field. King David was conquering territories for Israel.
Yeah.
King David was establishing an empire for the Lord.
While he was waiting on the Lord.
Right. In fact, the one time that he decided to sit on his hands and not go out and do what God had called him to do is when he really messed up in his sort of relationship space. But
yeah.
When he's saying wait on the Lord, he's not saying, God, bring things to me. He's saying, I'm going to be attentive to the Lord. I'm going to listen to the Lord. I'm going to trust in the Lord. I'm going to expect from the Lord.
And I'm also going to allow God to mold me during this process.
Yeah, in my pursuit of what he wants me
Yes.
to do, I allow him to shape me into what he needs me to be.
Yeah.
That is very different than ignoring part of your life because you're waiting for God to bring something about. Like, no farmer has ever ignored a field and harvested a crop from it,
No.
right? Not a good one. If you want to harvest something good, you have to plant and you have to invest and you have to get your hands in the dirt, right? And you can trust in God to make it bountiful, and you can wait on God to show himself mighty in that work, but you've got to start the process.
Yeah.
And you, single person listening to this, if you're feeling, weird about this, or if it's hitting you, or if you're feeling sort of a conviction about it, like this isn't meant to guilt you.
Or mad at us.
Or if you're mad at us, that's fine too. This isn't meant to make you feel guilty about decisions you've made in your past dating, but it's
Yeah.
just to encourage you that if you want to, it's to give you liberty to start the process of looking,
Yeah.
right? If you have boxed yourself into, I'm going to ignore the dating space and just wait. This is your permission to start asking questions, right?
Yeah.
Seeking recommendations if you want professional help working with a matchmaker, but it doesn't even have to be that, right? It can be,
Yeah.
I'm going to start investigating in myself and in the people around me what I want for my future marriage and our partnership,
Mm-hmm.
So, Brother Colin, I don't know if you intended to say everything that we just riffed off
Yeah.
of your conversation. So if Brother Colin comes back to us later and is like, y'all made up a bunch of this and whatever, like we'll come back and nuance it. But I was really grateful to sit with him because I think that he is a person who he did not wait aimlessly.
Mm-mm.
And he also did not let his dating experience diminish his calling and the work that he intended to do. And he's living in partnership now.
Yep. Thank you, Brother Colin.
Yep. It was really, really cool to talk to him. Anything else we want to call out for the folks that are listening here?
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day to our single moms. It'll be yesterday by the time this drops, but
I know.
yeah, if you're listening,
Happy belated Mother's Day.
right. If you're listening as a single person who is a mother, that's a really hard space to be in, and you're awesome.
Yeah.
If you're a single mom, you might not have had someone spoiling you for Mother's Day,
Yeah.
because it usually, depending on the age of the kids, it's often dad that's helping them make the breakfast and like wrap the presents and make the handprint things, you know what I mean? Like, single mom, if you're listening, you're an amazing parent. You're doing very, very hard work, and we know that it's not easy for you to be in that space. You are appreciated, you are valuable, and girl, you are totally dateable. So I look forward to a time in the future if you are looking to be in partnership where you are not doing the single parent thing and you're able to have someone there to help carry the load and spoil you on your next Mother's Day.
You rock.
You rock, Mom. Any other announcements? I don't think so.
No. Hey, babe.
Yeah.
Happy birthday and happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
And I love you.
I love you too.
And you're a fantastic mom and wife.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I love you.
I love you too.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
See
If
you
you
guys
like
next
the
time.
podcast, like it, leave us a comment so we can reply to them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And send us questions at what email?
Questions@synchronyproject.com.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.